Hello. Okay, for those of you returning to the channel, welcome back. And for those of you that are new here, that have just stumbled upon this video, then thank you for joining me. And welcome to the second episode in my series of retro movie reviews. This one being for the 1969 American drama Midnight Cowboy, directed by John Schlesinger and based on the 1965 novel of the same name. I've never read that novel, so I'm not going to be able to compare it. And just like all of the reviews that's going to be in this series, these are movies that I have never watched before until a couple of days ago in preparation for this review. These are my initial reactions to these movies for the first time, and that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this series of retro movie reviews, was for me to explore and discover an era of cinema that I've just never really sort of fully dived into. And at the moment, it's only been 2 movies and I've had a real good time exploring those 2 movies, with this Midnight Cowboy and the previous one, which was for Wings. So here we have Midnight Cowboy, directed by British director John Schlesinger, a name that I'm not familiar with, or at least I thought I wasn't, because after doing some research, I discovered that John Schlesinger was responsible for directing Pacific Heights, a psychological thriller starring Michael Keaton that came out in the early 90s. A film that I remember really enjoying, really liking. It was one of those movies that I would watch as a kid that I shouldn't have been watching, but it's also one of those movies that kind of contributed to my love of film. But it's been many years since I've seen it. I've been meaning to revisit it now for a long time, and I think the last time I watched the movie was in the 90s. But, you know, the reason why I mention this is it's one of the aspects that I really enjoyed about doing this series of retro movie reviews. And that is the learning sort of aspect, sort of the discovering and the exploring and sort of realizing that, you know, these are directors that I have actually experienced. I've experienced their work at some point in my life without even realizing it, as well as discovering directors for the first time, like with Wings. And I've really admired that aspect of doing these retro movie reviews for the channel. So the story, the plot of Midnight Cowboy, it follows a young Texan named Joe Buck. The film begins with Joe quitting his dishwashing job and heading by bus to New York City in cowboy attire to become a male prostitute. Once in New York, Joe ends up meeting an ailing conman, Rico Rizzo. An unlikely friendship grows between the 2 men as they work together to chase their dreams and escape their past. So yeah, this is the first time for me to watch this movie, and all I gotta say is, like, wow. This, for me, Midnight Cowboy was a very focused, grim, gritty, grounded story about these 2 lost souls, beautifully brought to life by John Voight and Dustin Hoffman. And we just follow these 2 characters, these 2 very lost characters, chasing their dreams and escaping their past. Or in the case of Dustin Hoffman's character, Rico, you know, someone who is trying to escape his current circumstances, which are pretty grim. You know, this is a film that says so much about these characters, about these individuals, without sort of telling you too much. For example, you know, without relying on expository dialogue to just sort of give you all of this information. Instead, these characters' backgrounds, their stories, you know, it's all brought to life beautifully through how this story is constructed from a visual perspective. For example, Joe Buck's, you know, history is brought to life through these flashbacks. As he's on his way to New York and as he's exploring New York, you'll get these moments where he's reflecting and thinking back on his past. And the way those moments were sort of incorporated into sort of this journey that we are following this character on was beautifully done. Like, it was very seamless, and it all kind of aids in what is a very focused and streamlined story where you were told so much about these characters. Like, I felt like I knew this character of Joe within the first 5 to 10 minutes, and the way in which that is done, the way in which that was achieved from a visual perspective was just beautiful, as well as it being aided by the magnificent performances from both Jon Voight and Dustin Hoffman. Dustin Hoffman in this movie is incredible. Like, there will be moments where the character will be just sitting there. He won't be saying anything, but he is saying so much through how he's holding himself, down to the way in which he's looking at the camera. And it would give me chills, it would give me goosebumps, because I just found the performance to be incredibly heartbreaking. It was compelling. You know, it was saying so much about that character in that moment, and I was just blown away by both performances. Jon Voight is incredible at bringing this very different character, Joe, back to life. You know, and it's as a result of these performances that allows you, or allowed me anyway, to buy into this friendship that blossoms between these two characters. There is so much depth and layers to this experience, to these journeys, you know, to these characters, you know, witnessing sort of this friendship blossom within the frame, and just sort of watching these characters sort of, you know, there is a depth there that is achieved not through sort of spewing all this information to you, you know, in expository dialogue, but it's all done through performances, sharp, organic, natural writing, and magnificent performances, and just a very focused and smart way of sort of telling the story. And it feels like you're on this journey with them. There's just the way in which the film, like what it did to me within the first 5 to 10 minutes, was just swallow me up and just immerse me into these characters' journeys in a way that was just incredible. Like, this was an incredible experience, and I just could not believe that this is a film that I've just not checked out up until now, because this was, for me, a movie that was very rich in history. It's a film that captures the time in which it was based, and it's a film that explores not the kind of the glorious, dreamlike sort of setting of New York, you know, where you've got these characters, and he's going to New York to chase his dreams. And I think we've all, you know, especially us who don't live in America, you know, we have this kind of notion of America, especially New York City, of being the land where people can go and chase their dreams and be what they want to be. But what this movie captures is that darker, seedier, grittier side to New York. You know, that kind of very true sort of side to New York that does actually exist. And by sort of seeing New York and seeing these characters within that side of New York, that kind of the underbelly of New York, it's what kind of really gives this movie that groundedness and that grittiness, and just gives a true reflection of what life is like for a lot of people. And like I said, you know, this is a movie very much of its time, and I'm not sure how much stayed the same for the adaptation compared to the novel. I'm not entirely sure what changes were made, but the film definitely alludes to a lot when it comes to these two characters, specifically Dustin Hoffman's character, and I kind of liked that aspect to the story, because as a result, it really kind of elevates the tragicness, the sort of the bleakness of these characters' journeys. And be honest, I mean, just heads up here, you know, this review has spoilers. This is a spoiler review. So if you've not seen the movie before and you want to go in blind, if you're like me and you've just, for some reason, gone on for years not checking this film out, then stop now, because I am about to go into a major spoiler. And with that being said, you know, when you get to that point within the third act where Rico dies on that coach next to Joe, whoa, like it hit me hard. And it's just, again, the reason being, you know, a lot of the reason being is because of the performances and how these characters are brought to life. It is truly beautiful, but it's also the writing and how these characters were written. For example, there's a scene earlier on in the movie where you have Joe and Rico in this rundown, abandoned apartment. You know, they're trying to survive by stealing food and all of that. And you have Rico's character trying to open this coconut. And it's all because Rico has this belief that coconuts and sunshine are the two main things that you need to sustain life. And that, you know, that's why he wants to escape to Florida. And there he is with this coconut trying to open it up. And you get this conversation between the two characters that gets quite heated. But it's what is said within that conversation, and then what you finally get right at the end during the very last moments of this movie, where from a visual perspective as well, you have Rico's character lying next to the window as they're driving into Florida. And on the reflection of the window, you can see the coconut trees going on by. It is heartbreaking. And just that, how that entire moment is constructed, from the way in which the camera is situated, to the performances, to just the writing. It's beautiful, but tragic. And the movie ends in that moment with the camera outside the coach window. You've got Rico, Dustin Hoffman, so his head is leaning against the window, and you've got the coconut trees just sort of in the reflection going on by. And it's moments like this within films where, in regards, you know, from a top storytelling perspective, I just absolutely admire, because it's just a shot, a setup where there's a lot going on within it, but says so much. And the movie ends there, and it's just, for me, in many ways, it's the perfect ending, but it also adds to sort of the bleakness and the tragicness of its story. And there's so much more that I felt like I wanted to know. I feel like in many ways, you know, this character, like I felt like there was more to the character of Rico that maybe I wasn't understanding or seeing. At the same time, I felt like that was actually also part of the magic of what this movie was attempting to do. And just to go touch back on sort of the writing, you know, that kind of leads me into the humour. So there is this kind of very kind of dry sense of humour running throughout the movie. It's quite witty, and it's very brief as well. But you will get this odd moment here and there where you'll get this sort of very kind of moment of levity, you could say, and it's very much needed in those moments, but it's also done in a way that's very clever and aligns with the movie's overall tone. And there's a couple of moments, for example, the scene that I was talking about just now with Joe and Rico in this apartment, and Rico's trying to open this coconut, and Joe just decides to sort of snatch the coconut out of Rico's hand because it's frustrating him that he can't open this bloody coconut, and he puts it onto the windowsill, slams the window down, and the coconut ends out on the street floor. And it's such an incredibly funny scene because of the way in which it plays out, but tonally it works beautifully along with the overall sort of the tone of this experience. As well as another moment that I gotta mention, which is the shoe shining moment, where they break open this box so Rico can clean Joe's boots, and then all of a sudden a police officer comes and sits next to them, and it's an incredibly well executed, clever, smart moment, and it really highlights how clever the writing was within this movie, and just how sort of well constructed this overall narrative was when it comes to tone, and just how it's all constructed and plays out. It was magnificent. It was beautiful. It was tragic, and I felt like it was a very important story to tell in many ways. You've also got a beautiful score composed by the legendary John Barry, a composer that I'm very familiar with, being a massive fan of the James Bond franchise, and he brings a beautiful soundtrack here to life. It's a soundtrack or a score that beautifully conveys the tragic nature of these characters' journey and story. The score has this dreamlike quality to it, this dreamlike nature to it, which I felt beautifully captures or conveys these characters' journeys. And it just brings to life what these characters are going through emotionally, mentally, and the music just does a beautiful job at capturing that, at conveying what these characters are going through. It's a beautiful score. It's a wonderful score that just elevates the entire experience. Midnight Cowboy, an incredibly deep, moving, bleak, tragic experience where it does a beautiful job at focusing on sort of the stories, the journeys of these two characters, of Joe Buck and Rico. Like, John Voight and Dustin Hoffman in this movie are incredible. I found myself smiling, I was laughing, I cried. And, you know, this is not an experience, you know, if you've never witnessed this movie before, it's not going to be one of those movies that you come out of it feeling good. You know, it's not one of those movies. Like, I sat there afterwards feeling quite distraught, really. I mean, it was not a, you know, it's not a happy film. But you will, for me anyway, I experienced an array of emotions with this experience, with this story. And it's an experience that I'm looking forward to revisit again. You know, because of how these characters were brought to life, because of the performances, and just sort of how this story was constructed, I just thought it was incredibly beautiful. So yeah, they are my thoughts on Midnight Cowboy, and I will be giving Midnight Cowboy my thoughts on Midnight Cowboy. But what do you guys think? Have you seen it before? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Then please let me know in the comments below and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future movie reviews from just some random Welsh geek rambling on, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. So for the third episode in my series of retro movie reviews will be a film that I have actually watched, but that was an awful long time ago, to a point where I can barely remember it other than how they brought the creatures or the dinosaurs to life within it, and that is 1960's The Lost World. I've not seen this movie since I was a kid, and like I said, this is a movie that I need to revisit. I've been meaning to revisit for a long time, and I thought it would be the perfect time to do that for this series, for my channel. So The Lost World from 1960 will be my next retro movie review. And I just want to say another massive thank you to all of those that have supported me over the last couple of days, weeks, years. It means an awful lot. Wherever that be, liking, subscribing, commenting, it just means the world to me. So yeah, that's it from me for now. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for the support. I really do appreciate it. I'll be catching you guys soon.